Today's video is a very practical one, hence the hair and makeup being undone. I want to teach you everything I've learned about the art and mastery of skincare layering over the years, the tips and techniques that I teach to patients to ensure they're getting the maximum bang for their buck from their products. I mean, why shouldn't we, right? It's a bit like having a Ferrari but not knowing how to drive. You have amazing products, but if you don't know how to use them correctly to get maximum impact, you are selling yourself short. So I'm going to be demoing the techniques that I have found to be absolutely indispensable so you too can get the very best from your skincare routine. Now, in terms of the technique that you use for a particular product that you're applying, it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. Now, let's take sunscreen, for instance. Now, what is key about sunscreen is that you get an even layer applied over the whole face and neck, or wherever it is that you're applying to, but we're talking about face and neck today. Now, the way sunscreen works, it's meant to be applied at a dose of 2 milligrams per centimeter squared, which is a lot of product. Everyone goes, oh my goodness, are you for real? Is that really how much I have to apply? And yes, I don't make the sunscreen rules. So the way I've devised to make that easy and actionable so you get the level of sunscreen protection promised on the pack is to use my 13 dot technique. And if you're new to the channel, I'm going to tell you exactly what that is. So for example, with sunscreen, of course, it's vital that you get that 2 milligrams per centimeter coverage over every inch of your face. And the reality is, without a structure to how you apply it, you almost always under-apply or misfit. So the 13 dot technique ensures that you don't, that you essentially paint the wall, which is your face, with your sunscreen. Now, Flawless Lily sunscreen is 3 pumps. That's the dose required to give you SPF 50. And it's the same for any sunscreen. It just, other brands don't spell it out for you. But we want you to make sure you use the right amount. So I'm going to show you how you apply that using the 13 dot technique. Now, I'm going to use facial moisturizer just because I want to show you the techniques today. I'm not showing you how much sunscreen to apply, and it means I can use different techniques and not make a mess of my skin. So 13 dots means 3 dots on the forehead, 3 more on your cheeks each, which means 9 dots now. And then we want to do 2 on the nose and 2 on the chin. And then you want to take whatever residue you have, use that to basically then glide over the skin. That way you don't miss bits. You check out the eyelids, you've evenly applied it, and you haven't focused on any one area more than another. Now, I've talked about using this for sunscreen, but I think we would easily use this for a serum that you'd apply all over, like vitamin C, for example, or indeed a retinoid. I find the 13 dot technique is something that once you get used to doing it, you find you almost can't do your skincare without it. So at the end of the day, 13 dot technique is for applying products that you want to apply evenly over your whole face. Now, the next technique I want to talk about is called zoning. Now, this is specifically for your active ingredients. Now, I zone active ingredients when I want to have the benefits of one set of ingredients in one part of my face, for example, the T-zone, and another in a different part of my face. Now, this is particularly common for those of you who have combination skin, who are typically oilier and potentially more clog prone in the center of your face, and perhaps more aging concerned on the outside of the face, where the skin tends to be a little bit drier. So there's a differential in how the oil glands behave. Now, for this, I would tend to use something like salicylic acid in my T-zone, which is more focused on those oily glands because it's oil soluble and it gets into the pore to exfoliate them nicely. So for that, I might use my Flawless Neutralizing Gel, which is here in a lab pot because I've run out. And what I would do then is what I call a modified dot technique. Now, I'm going to use moisturizer to demonstrate again, but I would take the salicylic acid based product, and then what I would do is 7 dots, where I do the forehead with 3 dots, the nose, 2 dots, and the chin, 2 dots. That's a total of 7 dots. And then I just massage that into those areas in a focused way. So I'm getting the salicylic acid to penetrate into those oily glands. Then for my cheeks, where I want more of that collagen building, redness reducing effect, I'm going to use Brightly, which contains azelaic acid and vitamin C in combination with niacinamide and bakuchiol. And I'm going to do the 6 dots that I haven't done yet. So I'm zoning the ingredients I want where I want them. So that's 6 dots on my cheeks and 7 dots with the salicylic acid on my T-zone. So that's active zoning, meaning I'm not duplicating unnecessary actives in areas where they're not needed. Now, we can get even more sophisticated with our techniques when we are tackling pigmentation. And this is definitely the area where I find myself giving patients a lot of education. So, firstly, we do a technique called double layering. Now, imagine, for instance, you have melasma, where typically you get pigmentation splodges on the forehead, on the cheekbones, and the upper lip. Now, how I teach patients to use pigmentation-based products, and sometimes I'm using hydroquinone in the context of the office, or other times people are using over-the-counter treatments like Brightly, which has got 10% azelaic acid. What I suggest they do to avoid getting edges, and by that I mean if you just apply your pigmentation product to said splodge, there is an edge because you haven't got a blended result. The way to do that is to apply your pigmentation product all over using your 13 dot technique, and then a double layer on the area of pigmentation for a more targeted approach. You end up with a layer all over and then a second layer directly where you want that increased intensity of effectiveness of your products. I've never seen this written about anywhere else, but I've developed the technique over years and I found this to be really great and avoids that kind of abrupt edge where the pigmentation treatment stops and normal skin starts. I'm going to demonstrate it, although I don't have any pigmentation, but imagine I have a layer all over and then I've got a focused area here. I would just pop a couple of dots and then you don't have to worry too much about the edge. You just blend it in until the product disappears, covering the area. Of course, there'll be a little bit of migration over the edge. That is absolutely fine. Skin lesions don't suddenly abruptly stop either. And that way you get this targeted approach in the area that you want the most activity while still getting a natural effect because the rest of the skin is being brightened at the same time. Now, still on the topic of pigmentation treatment, I want you guys to be such a pro at this. The importance of feathering at the edges, I cannot emphasize enough. So what I mean is where you've used that initial layer, your 13 dot layer, I want you to get used to blending it in at the jawline and at the hairline. I actually have seen patients not do this and end up with a very clear line of demarcation, which if you're using pigmentation products for long enough can happen. So just like your foundation, blend, 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 and you're feathering your pigmentation serum. Now, one technique I think everyone should be aware of is dilution. This is a very simple thing to do, but basically it's an absolute godsend if you found that something you've used is too strong for your skin. So, for example, you started out on tretinoin. This is 0.05%. My skin is well used to it. But at the beginning, it might have been too much. Transitioning from 0.25 to 0.05 might have been too abrupt. One way you can easily smooth the transition is by using a bland moisturizer. By bland, I mean it's got no actives in there whatsoever. It's just a blend of occlusives like shea or mineral oil or silicones and some humectants like glycerin or hyaluronic acid. It's got nothing extra hidden in there. And you're using it simply to knock back the strength of your retinoid. Now, do not fear, this will not inactivate your retinoid in any way. It's a very safe technique. You just have to make sure you blend the two well to get that dilution effect. But as a way of making sure that you never end up with the product that's too strong to use because you can always dilute it back to a level that is comfortable, I find it invaluable. Now, let's move on to moisturizer goggles. Now, this is a name I developed. I think it's kind of cute, but it's really, really important for those of you starting out on your actives journey. Now, what do I mean by moisturizer goggles? Let me show you. Basically, if you're starting out with a retinoid, you can almost guarantee that at some point in time, you're going to do this. And that will move retinoid from here to here. Now, this skin is totally different to this skin. This has very little in the way of sebaceous glands and is so thin that something that you're comfortable using here will most likely not be comfortable with you using it here, and that will mean the next morning you likely wake up with redness and maybe some dryness and maybe even puffiness. You know, it just depends. Sometimes these things can be quite dramatic looking. The way to avoid this is by preempting the possibility of it happening and putting on a protective layer of, yes, moisturizer goggles. I like to give things names so that you remember them, yes? I mean, this works for me, so I'm hoping it works for you. And basically all it is dabbing on maybe 5 dots of moisturizer all along the bony rim around the eyes, the orbital rim. And then the same again on the other side. And again, I'm using a moisturizer with niacinamide in it that I'm very comfortable using around my eyes. And then I just glide that around. But the idea is that you're actually creating a physical layer on top of the skin that functions like a barrier, so that even if you did, worst case scenario, move some retinoid across, it would be a barrier preventing absorption. That will absorb quickly, but I want it to be quite visible. It's not that I'm trying to put a thin sheer layer of moisturizer on, I'm trying to put something that's a physical barrier. In a way, it's also a reminder to be delicate when it comes to applying products near your eyes. That's moisturizer goggles. And then sticking with the theme of early use of ingredients like retinoids, the final technique I want to tell you about is the sandwich technique. Now, as you can imagine, it's 2 layers with something in the middle, just like a sandwich, and the 2 layers on the outside are moisturizer layers. So we use a term called buffering, where we put moisturizer on the skin before we apply an active. And again, this is something that I recommend to patients in the early days. This is a way of slowing down the absorption of your actives, and that's particularly important when we're using punchy retinoids like tretinoin. So it doesn't stop it from being absorbed. It's really important to recognize that. It's not going to prevent you from getting the benefits. Tretinoin is a tiny molecule that easily penetrates the skin barrier. That's why it's a pharmaceutical. But you will slow the penetration, and that tends to help keep barrier function that little bit more robust. But the way we can even go beyond that, we've got a layer of moisturizer underneath on cleansed skin, then you've got your layer of tretinoin. You can then put another layer on top. So really helping reduce what we call transepidermal water loss, which is basically the speed at which the air steals water from the surface of our skin. For our skin to be nice and healthy, for our barrier to work well, we need to stay hydrated. Now, if the air steals too much water from our skin, things go wrong. The barrier gets breached, we get dry, we get scaly. None of that is good. So the combination of a layer underneath and a layer on top, creating a moisturizer sandwich, is a great way, at least in the early days, while you're getting used to retinoids, for your skin barrier to stay healthy. So I've given you all my secrets today, all the little insider tips and tricks that I think mean you can use your skincare products for the ultimate results and the best possible improvement in your skin issues. I found them invaluable in my own skincare routine. I simply do not put sunscreen on without the 13 dot technique anymore. It's so ingrained in me. And I've also found that it really does limit the number of mistakes I make with retinoids. Even at this stage, we never really stop. It's a powerful tool, but I think that the right technique and the right approach to layering really can make sure that you limit the errors that happen, or that you can take care of them when they do. I've given you quite a few. Please tell me in the comments which one you think is going to be the biggest game changer for you, or one that you haven't heard of. I'd love to know. And if you like this more practical approach to videos, please give me a shout so I can do more. Bye for now.